If the college football playoff started last week, the four teams that would have been battling it out for the national championship would have been Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Georgia. But after championship weekend, the question is, who's in and who's out? Thanks for joining us. I'm Benjamin Savallo, and to my right is Kevin Bond. Kevin, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
The college football playoff is set. Alabama came in at number 1 as the SEC champion. Clemson came in at number 2 as the ACC champion. Notre Dame came in at 3, and number 4 was taken by Oklahoma, the Big 12 champion. The number 4 spot that was given to Oklahoma was arguably up for grabs by 3 teams. The other 2 were Georgia and Ohio State. So, Kevin, the question is, what do you like or don't like about this selection?
I think that the committee definitely made the right call by making Alabama number 1, giving them that first seed. They've shown throughout the season that they were able to handle all their SEC opponents, scoring 260 points on them combined, which is absolutely crazy. Coming in at number 2, I think they also made the right choice with Clemson. They ran through the ACC, also going undefeated. That highly vaunted defensive line has just been wreaking havoc in the backfield all season long. Those 2, I think, were great picks. I also like the OU pick. Kyler Murray, obviously highest QBR in the country. He's been electric all season long. Just the one thing that I didn't like is that inclusion of Notre Dame. They are an independent school. You can look at their strength of schedule, and that can be a knock to them. And then I'm just not fully sold on their quarterback, Ian Brooks. I mean, he's ranked 12th in the country in QBR, and you just don't have that elite talent like you seem to have with these other teams. I think that in my ideal world, I would have put Georgia in there in place of Notre Dame. Granted, they did have 2 losses, and it's hard for any committee to justify their inclusion in there. But you lose to perennial powerhouse Alabama in a lot closer game than anyone expected. And then you drop one at Death Valley early in the season, which is arguably the hardest environment to play in the country. What about you? Any thoughts?
Right. I think we can all agree that the committee got it right with the 1 and 2 spot. Those spots were kind of solidified by the time the season started. But where things get kind of muddy, of course, are that 3 and 4th spot. I think almost everybody can agree with that one. Notre Dame, of course, they're undefeated, and they started the season ranked so high. I don't think the committee was ready to kind of bring that chaos into the selection. Having a highly ranked team go undefeated all season, they didn't really have a reason to pull them back out of that ranking since they started there. And Oklahoma, I do like the Oklahoma pick. I too would have picked Georgia to hit that 4th spot. I think they are a top 4 team in the nation, but I understand why Oklahoma is that 4th pick. OU flat out just deserves it on paper over the other 2, over Georgia and Ohio State. Georgia, who I believe is the top 4 team in the country, has 2 losses, and I don't think 2-loss teams are going to make it into the playoffs anytime soon. I don't think they have. Or no, there was once. It happened once in the 4 years that this college football playoff has started. Ohio State has a horrific loss over Purdue, which is hard to overlook. While Oklahoma, they've avenged their schedule. They lost to Texas in the Cotton Bowl in Dallas, and then beat them in the Big 12 championship. So I think they have that right. They've won against every opponent they've faced this season. And so now let's move into matchups. First off, we got Alabama coming in as the first seed, going up against Oklahoma, the 4th seed, on December 29th at the Orange Bowl in Miami. Initial thoughts?
What I think it's going to come down to is which defense is stopping. Alabama, like we've said a million times, they have elite talent all across the front 7. And granted, OU can score a lot of points, as they've showcased. I mean, I think they're the highest scoring team in NCAA history, if I'm correct. And so they can put up points on pretty much anybody, but Alabama's not just anybody. So what it's going to come down to is Alabama just really limiting those big plays and controlling time of possession, and at the end of the day, playing Alabama football. So I know that Vegas has the odds at Alabama at 14-point favorites with the over-under at 79. I like both of those numbers. I think it will be a fairly high-scoring game, but I don't think it's going to be quite the shootout that OU has been used to over their season. What about you?
For me, Oklahoma, what they have to do is pretty much hope that it's just a 1-possession game by the end of the 4th quarter. If it's not, Alabama's proven that they can pick it up in the second quarter. They've been kind of slow. I don't know what's happened. They started off really hot at the beginning of the season. Now coming in at these final 3 games against the Citadel, against Auburn, and then against Georgia in the SEC title game. They started out really slow. They kind of sluggish, like they weren't exactly ready. They were tied at 10 at halftime with the Citadel, which nobody saw that coming. But then they also proved that they have what it takes to back that up in the second half. So I think what Oklahoma has to do is come out swinging in that first half, see how far they can space themselves from Alabama in that first half. If not, this may not go OU's way. So that kind of brings me to my next point. Jalen Hurts or Tua Tagovailoa in that first bowl game on December 29th. Tua, he's had some issues with his leg. Jalen Hurts took over in the SEC title game and showed why he probably should have been the starter all season, or made his point anyways. So who do you expect Nick Saban to come out with?
I think that's probably the biggest question in the country right now. I mean, Hollywood is probably already writing scripts for Jalen Hurts' story. You know, it's great. But I think that Jalen Hurts is the guy to go with. You know, Tua has had an amazing season, you know, starting last year when he came in and performed admirably. He's been doing pretty well all season, but he just has a couple of issues that I think that Jalen doesn't really have. Tua has a tendency to stare down his receivers because, in all honesty, he's been able to all season. If you're one of Alabama's receivers, you're going to go up and you're going to win that 50-50 ball more times than you are not. And you know, his inexperience on that level has been not really an issue just because they are Alabama. But I think that on this big of a national stage and against a team like OU, where if you're not scoring every possession or at least every third possession or other possession, it's going to be an issue. So I would go with Jalen just because of his proven experience, and I mean, he's done it time and time again, showing he can play on that big stage.
Yeah, and Tua kind of showed what happens if you're someone that inexperienced in a title game. You know, looking down his receivers, he turned the ball over twice that game and almost put Alabama in a really deep hole. But Jalen Hurts came in and took over and brought them back to a win and successfully got that #1 spot in the CFP. So the next matchup would be Clemson and Notre Dame. They're playing on December 29th as well in the Rose Bowl. So what do you think Notre Dame has to do? They've kind of been overlooked all season, especially coming up to the end of the season. What does Notre Dame have to do to get this win?
So the biggest thing for me in this matchup is Notre Dame has to control the line of scrimmage. You've got that front four on the Clemson side who has just been, like I said, wreaking havoc in the backfield all season long. Their leading sacks is like 14.5, I believe, on the season. And in order for them to have a chance, they need to control that offensive line. And then #2, I think the next thing is to limit those opportunities for the defense to have those takeaways for Clemson. Just get the ball out quick. Make sure you know what you're running, control that clock. You're going to be running a lot of slants, and at the end of the day, you're not going to out-athlete a team like Clemson if you're Notre Dame. You just don't have that type of raw talent. So keep it quick, control the ball, establish your run game, and most of all, control that line of scrimmage.
Interesting. So for me, I think what Clemson has to do to get the win, I believe that D-line, like you mentioned, for Clemson has been stellar all season. They're superstars. That's where the big names are. But there is one name, I think, on the defense that gets overlooked a lot this season, and he was key as a junior linebacker, Trey Lamar. He wasn't there against South Carolina. He was out with a small injury, and that's when Clemson, I think, was most problematic on defense.
They gave up like 600 yards, I think, against South Carolina.
It was nearly 600 yards or around 600 yards, and he wasn't there. But he is the glue for that defense as a junior linebacker. He's much more of a leader. He's been here before. He's been here, done that. And like I said, that was Clemson's biggest struggle, and he wasn't there. He's going to be key for slowing down those short passing plays that Notre Dame's Ian Book's so well known for, and he's going to be there to hopefully stop the holes that Dexter Williams has shown he can run through all season. He has over 900 yards running, and he missed the first 3 games. So Who do you have winning this Alabama? Let's go back to Alabama and Oklahoma. Who do you have winning that game?
I mean, I think you got to go with Alabama. You know, it's hard to say, but it feels like the Warriors did in the NBA a couple years ago. You know, the entire season it's been Alabama and then everyone else. So I think, like I said earlier, Vegas has it right with that 14-point favorite, and I think they come away with the W. Do you agree?
I am going to have to agree. It took me some time to finally come to terms with that. I don't believe Oklahoma's going to be able to score at every play, every drive, I mean, because that's what they're going to need to beat this Alabama team. Their defense has been just as stellar as Clemson's D-line has been all season. I don't see Oklahoma coming away with the win. Now let's move on to that Clemson-Notre Dame game. Who do you got taking that game?
I'm going to have to go with Clemson. I mean, Notre Dame, I think, is an unproven commodity. Like you mentioned earlier, they were ranked really high, but I think that is a product of the preseason rankings. Yes, they did have their signature win against, I think, number 7 ranked, but no, they were number 7 ranked Michigan for their opener. But other than that, you know, what have you done? So I think that Clemson has shown that they can play on this big stage. I mean, this is their 4th inclusion in the playoffs. And I think Dabo Swinney's team's going to come away with it. They're 11.5-point favorites right now, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was a little bit more than that when the final whistle blows.
I'm going to have to agree with you on that one, too. I think it's going to be a rematch between Alabama and Clemson. I think, what is this, the 3rd time these two teams have met? Mm-hmm. I don't see Notre Dame getting past Clemson. Now, like you said, they had that win over Michigan, but that doesn't look as nice as they wanted it when Ohio State just kind of ran over Michigan in the regular season finale. So, but let's talk about some what-ifs real quick. What if Oklahoma jumped to that 3rd spot in the final rankings, and Notre Dame was pushed back to maybe the 5th or 6th spot, and Georgia, like mostly everybody believes, got that 4th spot? What do you think? How would this change this outcome?
So I think at the end of the day, the outcome is not going to be different for the 1 and 4. Alabama showed that they can take Georgia. They just had to get the gears turning a little bit and get everything clicking. The biggest difference, I think, would be with that 2 and 3 matchup that's coming up. You know, Clemson's letting 600 yards to a team like South Carolina. You bring in a team like Oklahoma in there, and I think they're going to put up a little bit more. Kyler Murray is proven rusher. He's a proven passer. Like I said, he has the highest QBR in the nation right now, and I just think he might be too much of an athlete. Even if that pocket collapses, he could get out and then put Clemson away. And yeah, that's what I think would be the biggest changes.
And we talked about before, if Georgia and Oklahoma were those 3 and 4 spots, that Oklahoma would get that 3rd spot over Georgia. Why do we believe that?
So you gotta look at the overall record. I think Oklahoma is just a little bit more deserving. Yes, they did drop 1 to Texas, but they avenged that. And I think it's, like you said, again, it's going to be a long time before we can readily accept 2 lost teams consistently into the playoffs. It's hard for the committee to justify picks like that. And until it inevitably expands, because it's going to expand, that just won't happen. And, you know, at the end of the day, regardless of who you pick, you're going to have millions of people who aren't going to agree with you and can poke holes in your arguments. But I think that Georgia being left out is just a byproduct of that. So.
All right, well, nevertheless, the top 4 teams are Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Oklahoma. They'll be battling it out for the 5th installment of the college football playoffs. From my right-hand man, Kevin Bond, and your host, me, Benjamin Savallo. Thank you. See you next time.